for elementary principles of chemical processes, which I'm fairly sure a number of you went through years ago when you were first getting into the chemical engineering education business. And all I can tell you is, I'm sorry. So what we're going to talk about today is this. I presume that some of you are contemplating academic careers. Some of you maybe not yet, but you're not sure what you want to do, and at least academic careers are on the table of possibilities for after you finish here, and you will finish here, right? Whatever it may feel like to you now. And some of you may not be particularly thinking about going into academia after you graduate, but maybe I'll throw a couple of ideas at you that cause you to maybe think a little bit more about it than you have been up until now. So I'll start out by telling you that sometime probably later today, but you'll be getting in your email a handout which will encompass everything I'm going to be telling you in the next hour and more, so you don't have to take copious notes on anything that you see up there. If I tell you anything that isn't in the handout, I'll try to remember to alert you to it in case you want to jot something down about it. So this is what is in the handout and is a rough guide to what I'm going to be telling you today. We'll start out, it starts out with a list of resources, things that you might be interested in reading that provide depth of information about the pros and cons and ins and outs of a faculty career, and a couple of electronic resources. Things that you can do now to start getting yourself prepared for an academic career, whether you believe you want one or not. The suggestions I'm going to give you are good things to do regardless of whether you go into academia or industry or government or whatever it may be. They're just useful things to do. But they will give you a good head start in terms of getting an academic position and then getting off to a good start in one if you choose to take that path. I'll go through some work by Robert Boyce, who was responsible for that quote that started up there, on strategies that new faculty members have found very effective in jump-starting their careers once they have an academic position. And then there are 4 reprints that I've included in the handout. One talks about how to write anything, and even if nothing else in this presentation proves to be useful to you, I'm going to be strongly suggesting that you pay attention to that because, among other things, that'll help you get your dissertation written in this lifetime. Things I wish they had told me is exactly what the title suggests. When I was a new faculty member back in the late Jurassic period, I had to learn everything pretty much by trial and error because, and this is one general point I'll make to you, if you go into academia, if you go into become an assistant professor somewhere, you will have stumbled into probably the only skilled profession for which no background or training is provided or presumed necessary or even desirable. Nobody teaches graduate students, I shouldn't say nobody. Occasionally, you're lucky enough to get a really good advisor who doesn't just function as a research supervisor, but is really a mentor and helps prepare you for the things that are going to await you if you go into academia. For the most part, they just throw you into the deep end, and you have to learn how to start and build a research program pretty much yourself. What graduate school teaches most graduate students is how to go to work on a research project that someone else has defined and gotten the funding for and set up the laboratory, whatever it may be. When you join a faculty, nobody's going to be doing that for you, and you got to figure out how to do it yourself. And similarly with teaching, nobody teaches college professors how to teach as a rule. You have to learn how to do that on your own too. And Boyce has found some ways of cutting the learning curve in both of those activities, research and teaching, and we'll be talking some about that over here. And some of those are the things that I wish somebody had told me to help me avoid the usual 5-year learning curve. So you want to win a career award, one of the first things that's going to happen to you if you get an academic position, you know, is they're going to say, good morning, Dr. Jones. Welcome to the faculty. We're delighted to have you here. This would be a good time to start working on your career award. And we'll say more about that in my final walkthrough. And then how to prepare new courses while keeping your sanity. Probably the second most time-consuming thing that I've ever had to do in my life was teach a course for the first time and get everything set and ready for it. And the most time-consuming task was writing a textbook. And I'm also going to be advising you, don't even think about doing that, at least until you get tenure. Okay, so that's the handout. All right, I'm going to start by posing a problem to you and giving you a chance to interact with one or two of your colleagues and come up with some answers to the question I'll be asking. So you're close to finishing your doctorate. Your research is just about done, or your postdoc if you're on that track. And you haven't been doing badly. You've got 3 papers that you've published so far on your dissertation research while you're still a graduate student. And you got 2 more in press. So you've been busy. And you've given a couple of conference presentations. And now you're ready to go look for a job, and you've sent out applications to NCVs to over 50 universities. You've gotten rejections from 46 of them. And you got 5 phone interviews, only 2 of which resulted in invitations to visit the campus and present, and no job offers came out of them. So this isn't a happy story. Question for you is, what might be wrong? So what I want you to do is pick 1 or 2 neighbors that you're going to work with, introduce yourselves to each other if you don't already know each other, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to speculate on what might be responsible for this individual's lack of success. Then I'll stop you. I'll call on a couple of you to share one of the things that you came up with, and then I'll show you my speculations on what might be the problem, and we'll see how many of them you collectively get. Okay, you have about 2 minutes for this. See how many ideas you can generate. Go.
What?
So what might be the problem?
One more minute.
Presume though that you'll speak how do you know that's a great application?
Okay, let me stop you. Okay, in the red sweatshirt, what's one idea that your group came up with? I love calling on people when their mouths are full of pizza. Sorry about that. Okay, what one idea?
We thought that maybe the applicant is not qualified for the position, and partially maybe it's because that he only had like 3 papers published.
Okay.
If that's as a postdoc, I think that was a really
Okay, so there's two possibilities that were raised. One, not right for the position. This person just fired off applications to departments without bothering to find out whether that department had any interest in research in the area that this fellow proposed to work with, or this woman. And another one, what was the second one that you suggested? One was not right for the position. The other one was they viewed that performance, which looks pretty good to me, but by their standards, this individual, especially if it's a postdoc, should have had a lot more publications by then. What's another one? Yeah, yes.
Oh, so we were discussing that maybe he sent the same application to all schools instead of personalizing each for each.
Okay,
case.
he just prepared one cover letter, one resume, duplicated it 50 times and fired it off without bothering to check on, are there any likely connections between me and the places that I'm applying? Okay, good. Somebody, anyone, give me another one.
We were thinking also that maybe this person is a good researcher, but this doesn't have the right communication skills to show that to other people.
Okay, maybe a great researcher, but the cover letter was incoherent. Person cannot write English, and that's a turnoff to places reviewing 150 applications for this one vacancy. Bad writing can be enough to get it tossed off the pile immediately without regard to what are their qualifications. Another one? Yeah.
We also discussed with the communication or people skills that maybe he was invited to do different campuses and he didn't have that connection with the people there, so he doesn't portray whatever he's trying to communicate well.
Okay.
to people.
Possibly the two invitations that he got were not particularly appropriate for him, or he just simply didn't convey to them a sense that he would be right for them, or maybe even that he was really interested in them. He's just looking to get a job and not tying his interest to whatever the interviewers are looking for. Okay, good. You can think of others, but that's a good list. Let me share you what the research has shown in terms of what is likely to lead to a lack of success in applying for an academic position. One, their plans were very vague, right? I'm interested in continuing my research, and I'll teach because that's part of the job description, and that's about as specific as it got. And so all of the suggestions that you made about there's no apparent connection between what they're looking for and what this individual can present, because he's not really presenting anything. Maybe he did specify some research projects. I'm just using the generic he here. It could equally well be a woman. All right. He proposed some projects which didn't look like they would stand much of a chance of being funded in today's competitive market. And if there's one thing that all academic institutions are interested in, it's getting grant proposals funded. They have to get them funded. They're not getting enough money to support all of their activities in the absence of research funding. Nothing in that application said anything about teaching, an interest in teaching, the possibility of an ability to teach well, and really knowing nothing about teaching, just having the idea that all you have to do is stand up in front of people and tell them what you want them to know, and you're teaching. And that's wrong. They have no knowledge or connection. Several of you got this in different ways. Nothing that says, I really want to go to the University of X. You're doing some research there that I'm really excited about and I think I can contribute to. Nothing of that in the application. And the university is not going to assume that there are those good connections. Poor writing, you got that one. And there's no self-promotion. The individual just says, here are my credentials, right? Here's what I'm looking for, and that's it. Nothing about, here's why I would be a perfect addition to your faculty. Here's what I can contribute to your program, which I already know a lot about. And in the absence of that, they're not going to give the applicant the benefit of the doubt. All right, please interrupt with questions with anything that I say. Don't wait for me to ask you if you have questions. If I say anything that causes a question mark to come up in your mind, throw it in. At which point I'll say, do you have any questions? Yeah.
How big of an impact would be coming from a top institution like MIT or Stanford or Caltech as opposed to?
How big an impact would coming from Stanford, MIT, or Caltech? Quite big. Right? In fact, it can be huge if you're applying to one of those institutions. There's a lot of snobism in the academic world, and an MIT and a Caltech, unless you're already potential Nobel Prize material and you're coming from the University of East Nowhere, you've got a hard row to hoe. However, you're coming from North Carolina State University, and North Carolina State University it's not in the top 5 in these rankings, but it's in there in the top 10 to 20, and we have been remarkably successful in getting our doctoral graduates into those places. Yeah.
Besides the CV and maybe the cover letter, what exactly goes into a faculty application?
Whatever they say they want. Yeah, I mean, you look at the individual school you're applying to, and they usually have some guidelines for people applying for faculty positions. The cover letter is vitally important, though, because that's where you're going to do a lot of your selling, right? That's where you're going to indicate, here is what I know about your institution and your department that I'm really excited about. Here are the faculty members who are doing research that I really think I could contribute to. Here are the areas that I'd like to go in, the collaborations that I'd like to establish and so forth. All that's in the cover letter, and all that needs to be in the cover letter. And then if there are other things, references that they want you to submit and so forth, they'll indicate that in the material on their website. Yeah.
What would be a good lens for the cover letter?
What would be a good
Lens for the cover letter.
a good lens?
Length.
Length for a cover letter, 2 pages maximum, all right? And if you can write a really good cover letter that does all those things in 1 page, it's a really good thing. They've got stacks of cover letters. It's not easy to get an academic position at a really good university, and I wasn't exaggerating when I talked about 100 applications for every vacancy and so forth. And they're not really interested in reading all of the details of your life and history in a 5-page letter. So brevity is really important, and making pretty much every word count should be your goal. And the other advice I'll give you about the cover letter and the application is the same advice I'd give you about a proposal that you would submit anywhere and a paper that you submit to a journal. Never, never, never make your target the first people to read whatever you've written, right? Do everything you can with your colleagues, your fellow graduate students, your advisor, other faculty members. Beg them, plead with them, bribe them, do whatever you need to get them to read and criticize, give you feedback on it before you send it off to whoever it's going to. Okay. Couple of tips on preparing for an academic position, things you can do starting right now to make yourself rise up in the priority list of all of the applications that they get. And as I said before, these are good things to do regardless, not just for applying to an academic position, but just in general. First, on the research side, don't just say, when you apply for an academic position, I've been doing research on this and this, and I'm going to keep doing that. Right? That's not going to tell them, you don't get a lot of funding generally for just redoing your dissertation research over and over and over again. You got to have plans to expand it, to broaden it. And that means that you need to start doing research on it now before you get out there. Take a look at your dissertation research area and see what possibilities it offers for expanding it, for broadening its scope, for hooking it into new applications and new areas and so forth. And then once you've done that kind of thinking, start drafting proposals, identifying what would be a likely funding agency to fund this particular project that I think I might be interested in doing in my new academic position. Maybe the NSF, maybe the NIH, maybe the DOD, whatever it is, but identify with the help of your advisor and anyone else you can talk to about it, and then sketch out, outline proposals that you might write to them. Because when you go on a job interview, or you send in your cover letter and your CV, and your CV can have future areas of future research interest, you can identify, I'm going to write a proposal to do this to the National Science Foundation, and here's why I think they'll be interested in it, and so forth. If you can go into a job application procedure armed with 3 or 4 of those, so that you have concrete plans for how you're going to get your research program started, it's going to jump you way up on the list of prospective candidates who aren't going to do that. Look over proposals that have been successful in your department here to see what a successful proposal looks like, and take what you learn and include it in the drafts of proposals you're going to be preparing. See if you can get some experience with research supervision. You're an experienced graduate student, a brand new graduate student, fresh out of undergraduate school, comes and goes to work for your advisor, and your advisor would like you to help out in getting them started, orienting them to the research, do it. Or if the advisor has taken on an undergraduate researcher and would like you to help them get started, do that. Because when you go for your interview, the more you can talk about experience supervising research, the better you're going to look to them, because that, of course, is what they're going to want you to do if you join their faculty. And do all of those things. Present at conferences, write papers, do the first drafts at least, and hopefully your advisor, if you do that, will make you the first author on the paper. Submit them to good journals, and take principal responsibility for them. And again, the more of those you can do, and the more you get on your CV along those lines, the better you'll look when you're applying. Also, when you go to conferences, go out of your way to meet the heroes in your research field, the people who are well known, and introduce yourself, and be prepared to talk to them about their research and ask them questions. The more they know your name, the better it's going to be, especially if you subsequently apply to their university for a faculty position. Again, questions if you have them. And then on the teaching side, get as much teaching experience right now as you can. The more experience you have in doing the things faculty members do, the better you're going to look when you're applying. The better you're going to compete with the 99 other people who are applying for the same position. So do some teaching. Most TAs, if you end up being a teaching assistant, most of what they do is grading papers and that sort of thing, which doesn't do very much for you in an application for a faculty position. But if your advisor's going out of town to a conference or to give a talk somewhere and would like you to cover his or her class, do it. Right? And even if you know that they're going out of town, even if they don't come to you and ask for it, you can ask them. You can say, you know, Wednesday's lecture, I know you're not going to be here. I'd be happy to cover that for you. And nothing but good will come out of that. First of all, they may or may not say yes, but they're going to be really pleased by your announced availability. And the more you can teach, the more you can give lectures or cover recitation sections, or teach your own class if it comes to that, the better prepared you'll be for the academic position, and the stronger you'll look on a proposal, on an application. Learn something about teaching. Right? I'm not here to sell my book. I have 2 books. One is the one we mentioned before, the Chemie textbook, and then my wife and colleague and I in 2016 came out with a book called Teaching and Learning STEM. A copy of it is in that display case outside the Chemie office, in which we've given something like 500 workshops over the last 20 years around the world to college faculty on how do you teach. Right? And we've taken everything that we think we know and we think we've learned from our experience and put it in that book. And that's the quickest and easiest way to start orienting yourself to modern instructional techniques that go beyond I stand and talk for 50 minutes and you sit there and listen, which is a supremely ineffective teaching method. Anyway, find out about some of those things, and when you do get a chance to teach, try them out. The more you do them, the better you'll get at them, and the better you'll be in a position to talk about them in your job interview. Write a philosophy of teaching and start assembling a teaching portfolio. If you do any teaching or tutoring, document it. Write it down. What did you do? What did you cover? Who did you teach? And when was it? And here's your philosophy of teaching. And anything you do up here, you can put in your teaching philosophy if it is something that you agree with and believe in. A lot of applicants have got the idea that at modern research universities, teaching doesn't matter. The only thing they care about is research, and all I got to do is impress them that I'm going to be a successful researcher, and you know, with or without the teaching, I will stand a good chance of getting hired. And that's completely wrong. Your research credentials are obviously critically important. If you don't have a strong, convincing case that you're going to be making major contributions to the research program, you're not going to make the cut. You're going to go off the stack of applicants immediately. But what they're going to do is get to a short list of applicants who survived the first screening or two, and now they're down to their top 5 to 10 candidates out of the 100, 200 that were there initially, and now they're going to telephone interviews of that short list, and eventually a list of 3 or 4 candidates who get invited to interview. Every one of those candidates on the short list has the credentials to be a world beater in research. If you don't have those, you're not going to get onto the short list. But now they're going to have to make a decision. Sometimes one of those candidates will just rise way up to the top on the research credentials. This person is clearly going to be a leader, world leader in the field. And they may get the job offer on that basis, but much more often the top 3 candidates are all in that category, and they still have need a basis for making the decision, and what's left? Teaching. Schools that hire new faculty members want them to be good teachers. They definitely want them to be great researchers. They also want them to be good teachers. They don't want to have to be bothered with students writing petitions to get this bum away from us. And this person should be barred by law from ever standing in front of students and, you know, going to the dean, the department. They don't want that. And they shouldn't want that. And also, I think they genuinely want to give their students a good learning experience. And so if you come in armed with that, a clear knowledge of effective teaching methods and the ability to use them and experience in using them, and all other things are equal, you're going to get that job offer, because those other candidates are not likely to be doing that. And I have several personal experiences where it worked out exactly that way. Candidate was on the short list, had done that, and competing against world beaters in research, got the job offer. Okay, anything on the preparations that you can do now, research, teaching, or anything else to improve your chances when you're applying before we go on? Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that our university offers 2 programs to help facilitate gaining those skills. The first being the Certificate of Accomplishment in Teaching,
Right.
and the second, the
Preparing
Preparing Professoriate.
the Professoriate. Absolutely right, and strongly advise you, if you're even mildly considering an academic position, go for one or both of those programs. There's a third program called Building Future Faculty, which is not limited to people on this campus. People come from all over the place, but to participate in this preparation for an academic career, but some of them are from NC State. And any of those, the experiences and the training they give you will give you a serious leg up in the quest for a position. Good, thanks. Anything else? Yeah.
How often do universities look for teaching-only faculty positions?
Depends on which universities. The question was, how often do they look for teaching-only positions? More and more. I mean, 10 years ago, I would have said, forget that. The only ones who look for teaching-only positions are the ones who really don't have research programs, or have, you know, maybe they have research expectations, but they're really minor on the scale of things. But research universities, Research One universities like us, they don't have them. Now they do, all right? And more on campuses that we go to, there are these teaching professorships. Generally, they're not tenure track, but they exist. And if you're interested in, that's what you want to do. You want to teach. You're not particularly interested in getting into the research rat race. Then you can find more and more of those schools advertising for teaching faculty positions. And there are also more and more departments of engineering education in the country. 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, whatever it was, Purdue started that. It was a Department of Engineering Education. And then 2 years later, Virginia Tech came along and put one in. And now, practically every time I look at the Chronicle of Higher Education, another 2 or 3 have popped up. Cincinnati, Ohio State, you know, I can't keep track of it. And that's another possibility for getting a teaching-only position, except there's an asterisk to that. It's not teaching only. They also have an expectation of research, but research on education, not research on biomolecular engineering or something like that. So you've got to keep your eyes open, but the possibilities are out there. Okay, so finally, on this line of attack, how do we prepare for the job interview? There's a fairly long list of tips and a reference to an online article that gives you lots of useful information about preparing. If you get the call, we'd like you to visit our campus, there are some things that you should do to streamline how that goes, and just a couple of them are here. You better be ready. If they ask you, tell us about your research plans, or what courses do you think you'd be prepared to teach? What would you like to teach, and so forth. You be ready with specific answers to those questions, because I promise you, you're going to get them. When you prepare your seminar, your job talk, which is the seminar that you give on, usually on your dissertation research, then don't make where you're applying the first people to hear that talk. Practice it for your mirror, and then see if you can persuade your friends or your advisor or anyone else to listen to it and to give you hard critique on it. Polish it, do it again, so when you get out there, you're really smooth at it. And some institutions would like you to teach a sample lecture or lecture fragment, and if you're applying to one of those places, prepare that exhaustively before you go and do it. And again, sell yourself. If you're not enthusiastic about yourself, if you don't come across with an idea that I really want to come here, this is a perfect place for me, and here's why, and here's what's going on here that I can contribute to, and I think, you know, without patting myself on the back too much, I really think I am an ideal candidate to come on this faculty. If you don't show that enthusiasm, why would you expect them to be enthusiastic about it? Okay, that's preparing for an academic position and doing everything you can to help yourself get one. What I want to do for the rest of the talk is go over some of Robert Boyce's work in a book, Advice for New Faculty Members, and everything I refer to here you're going to have in the handout, the citation, bibliographic citation. Boyce is somebody who has made a career out of studying new faculty members and what happens to them following their career trajectories. And as that opening quote said, he's looked at over 1,000 of them. And the main question that he asked was, how long does it take these people that I'm looking at to master the profession, at least enough to meet or exceed the institution that they're at, their expectations? So how long does it take them on average to get to full productivity, meeting the institution's requirements in research and effectiveness in teaching to meet or exceed the institution's requirements? And what he found was that for 95% of them, it was a 4 to 5 year learning curve. That's how long it took most of them, the 95%. 5% beat the game. They found ways to knock 3 years off the learning curve, so they were fully up and running in 1 to 2 years. And this is a major thing that institutions love, because every new faculty member they hire, they're putting $1 million into in one form or another. And the idea of getting return on their investment in 2 years instead of 5 years is very appealing to them. And if they get an idea that you're going to be one of those quick starters, again, it's going to boost you way up on that pile of applicants. All right. I'm going to give you another thing to think about for a minute, and then I'm going to go pretty quickly through what Boyce found so that you can have time for questions at the end. But I want you to talk to your neighbor again for about a minute. Boyce found, he identified 4 common mistakes that the 95% routinely made that limited, that slowed them down in the progression to productivity and effectiveness. But the quick starters found ways to avoid them. Take 1 minute back with your neighbors. What do you think the common mistakes are that new faculty members make that really slow them down? Try that.
What's the name of well, I'm just trying to yes, if you don't kind of just try and figure it out here. It doesn't take long.
We've been learning to multitask. Yeah, this one. The other thing I was thinking is, well, yeah, it's like recruiting and something.
Okay, let me stop you. In the back, either one of you, what's one speculation of yours or a common mistake?
Publications and high enough quality and getting them out quick enough.
Okay, not really pushing publications while they're in graduate school, getting them out the door and getting them of sufficient quality that they were accepted by good journals, refereed journals. Okay, what's up here? What's another possibility?
Another possibility is that they do not plan well, or they are not confident to execute their plan.
Okay, they don't plan well. Their plans are kind of vague and fuzzy, and they don't have clear implementation plans to put their plans to work once they get out there on the new job. Another one. Anyone?
Maybe they try to solve every problem on their own, try to reinvent the wheel.
Okay. Figure out, I got to do all this by myself, and they try to do everything on the teaching side and the research side themselves, and they don't get help from anyone. They don't seek help, and they don't accept help if help is offered. All right, good. I mean, that's not good, but that's a good speculation. One more? Yeah.
Time management, also just managing people.
Yeah, time management. All right, you got a lot of things that you've got to do on the research side, on the teaching side, on the balancing these competing demands, and maybe if there's any time left over, having a life. And that's not something people were born knowing how to do anymore, and they were born knowing how to do research and teaching, and they just may not do a particularly good job of that or even attempt it. All right, let's see what Boyce found. 4 mistakes and the success strategies that the quick starters found. Mistake 1, if they're at a research institution like this one, they know that their bread is buttered on the side of research. They got to teach reasonably well at least, but if they don't get the proposals funded and the papers published, they're not going to make tenure. And so they know that, but if they look at, if you look at where their time is going, which Boyce did, he had them keep time logs. Not much of it was on scholarly writing. What they were doing was spending their time putting out fires. So here's the position they're in. I got to get this proposal off to the NIH in 3 weeks. And I got to get this lecture planned by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And which one do they go with? Being human, you go with whatever's leaning hardest on you. And so they were just taking care of these immediate, urgent needs and putting off the big projects like the proposal and the paper. And they relied on the block of time theory of writing. What's that? I don't have time to work on the proposal now, but as soon as it's fall break, as soon as it's Christmas, as soon as it's the weekend, then I'll get serious about it. And that's the way they approached it. The problem was that as soon as a break came, 2 things happened. 1, other things rushed to fill it. Like if they had families whom they've been putting off now, I don't have time to take you to the movie or whatever it is, but as soon as it's fall break, I'm all yours. And now it's fall break and they're looking expectantly at you. And then the other problem with the block of time theory is that when you finally do sit down to write the proposal, it's been so long since the last time you looked at it that you forgot where you were. There's an induction period before you build your momentum up, and by the time you do, the block of time may be over. So you're not producing. You know you have to if you're going to make tenure and promotion, but you're just not doing it at the rate you need to, and this leads to considerable anxiety. The success strategy is the brief daily writing sessions. And this is going to be one of the most important suggestions that I give you. You schedule a half an hour a day or 45 minutes every other day or something like that, and you make an appointment. You put it on your calendar. From 3 to 3:30 on Monday through Friday, I'm going to work on the proposal, no matter what else happens. I'm not going to answer my phone. I'm going to turn off that little beep that sounds whenever an email message comes in. I'm going to shut off my cell phone, and I'm going to work on that proposal. And then at the end, at 3:30, I'm going to stop. And the next day at 3 o'clock, I'm going to go do another half hour of it. The consequence when you do that is it's really powerful. You minimize warm-up time because at 3 o'clock on Thursday, you remember exactly where you left off at 3:30 on Wednesday, and you just charge right in and keep it going. And you're making steady progress. If you do that faithfully, you'd be amazed at how much you start churning out of that proposal and that paper. And a half an hour a day is not going to keep you from putting out that many fires. 3:30, you go back to putting out the fires and planning tomorrow's lecture and whatever else you're doing. And they've studied this, and it's in Boyce's book that you've got a reference to in the handout. These are the binge writers, the block of time writers, the most writers, 95%, whatever it is. And hours per week, about double on the big proposals as the binge writers if they're using the writing sessions, where you really see the difference is what they're producing. Manuscripts submitted in 6 years by the binge writers and by the brief daily writing session people. Manuscripts accepted, same thing. Huge difference in productivity. So this is one I strongly recommend you take home with you. And before we get to the next one, there's a handout in your, there's a paper in your handout called How to Write Anything, right? Which says, how do you get the proposal written? How do you get the paper written? How do you get the dissertation written in this lifetime? Right? And you're graduate students, so I wanted to just dwell a minute on this one. That little paper, How to Write Anything, contains 2 basic suggestions. One is this, the brief daily writing sessions. The other one is what I'm going to give you right now. Here's the way most people write. You sit down at the keyboard and you write the first sentence of whatever it is you're going to work on. And you look at it and you say, delete, worthless. Right? You try again for that first sentence. And that's better. And you say, well, that's not bad, but if I, instead of saying this, I said that, maybe put a comma here, maybe whatever. And so you go back and forth like that, and 25 minutes later you get that sentence written to your satisfaction. Then you write the second sentence. Immediately the first one's obsolete. So you cross them both out, and 3 hours later you got 2 paragraphs written. And you're not going to get the dissertation written like that, or the proposal, or the paper. Here is the way you write. You write the first sentence. And then you write the second sentence. And then you write the third sentence. And you ignore those voices in your head telling you what absolute garbage you're producing. And so say, go away, I'll get to you later. And in a reasonably short period of time, you got a block of material written, a couple of pages. The problem with that original method, which so many people use, is you're slopping together 2 functions, the critical function and the creative function. You're criticizing yourself while you're creating. A word at a time, you're copy editing, and that doesn't work. Once you have a block of 3 pages of material, now you can take off the creative hat, put the critical hat back on, and now you can do, in a reasonable period of time, a meaningful job of polishing and revising. And maybe the initial couple of sentences you wrote when you were free writing like that were garbage, so you can just throw those out. But what followed them was much better than you were telling yourself at the time. So those 2 suggestions are in How to Write Anything. And I strongly, strongly recommend that you read that paper and pay attention to it when you're working on your dissertation. And you won't be in the horrible position of going ABD. You know what ABD stands for? You need to know. ABD stands for all but dissertation. And that's the nightmarish story of the graduate students working on their doctorate who come in and they get the research done. They complete the experiments, they do the write-ups, they publish the papers.